record. Okay. So, to give you a sense of who's hosting the event, the Institute was founded in 1995 to research and celebrate the vernacular culture of the north and northeast of Scotland in all its forms. So our core work comprises teaching, research, and public and community engagement. As part of our teaching commitments, we run a year-long master's programme in ethnology and folklore, which equips students with valuable theoretical and practical tools and knowledge to study culture in everyday life. And in terms of our research, our staff and students publish work on a wide diversity of topics relating to the region in academic journals and in other formats, as well as presenting at conferences all over the world. And in our public and community engagement work, we work together with partners to devise and deliver projects and activities that help build communities and raise awareness of the diverse expressions of Northeast culture. And so you can find out an awful lot more about us at aiberdeen.ac.uk/Elphinstone. That's our website, and there's lots of information there. So as ethnologists and ethnomusicologists, we're interested in people's everyday cultural practices, routines and traditions, both on and offline. And we ask questions like, what is this practice? What is this thing that people do? And how is it informed by the past? How might it inform the future? Why do people do it? How do they do it? What role does it play in their life and in society and in their community? And what does it mean? What meaning does it have? And many more questions besides. So those are some of the questions that we'll be exploring tonight in this event with our guest, Aiberdeen Mannie. Aiberdeen Mannie is a prominent Instagrammer based in the northeast of Scotland with a following of around 12,000, whose humorous videos have proven very popular in the northeast of Scotland with northeasters near and far, young and old, long settled and recently arrived. A keen Fitba fan, musician, dog da, and partner to the missus, he creates and shares short-form videos recounting humorous and sometimes more serious anecdotes about his everyday life in the northeast. And interestingly, he's not the only northeaster to have gathered a large following online in this way. So in recent years, there's been a sort of growing cohort of internet users in the region who could be attributed the status of internet celebrity. Examples include TikTokers Doric Dad, Tuchter Quine, Chris Reed, or Instagrammers Afa Fine, Mike, Faye Cabrach Radio on Facebook, and many others. And while these internet users perhaps wouldn't use the term celebrity to describe themselves, it can be useful for identifying, organising and studying a portion of cultural life online. Media anthropologist Crystal Aiberdeen has defined internet celebrity as a quality exhibited by those whose fame is native to the internet, that's number one, who are highly visible to both the human and the machine eye, algorithms and humans, and attract and retain an audience, often in the form of likes or followers. So together, these users that I talked about just a second ago, whose content heavily features the region's kind of cultural practices and traditions and ways, reach hundreds of thousands of users, both local and international, and are likely shaping, probably in important ways, how the region is viewed by others and how the people in the region view, how the region views itself. So I think in speaking directly to some of those who create the content, maybe we can start to get a handle on what this means and what this phenomenon maybe is. So anyway, that's what we are here to do tonight. Have a chat directly with one of the creators, and I'll stop speaking and we'll get on with the discussion in just a second. I have some questions to pose to Aiberdeen Mannie to kick us off, and I'll ask them, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience afterwards. So as I said, as always with Zoom, please keep your mics on mute while we're chatting, just because it can interfere with the quality of the event if there's any kind of sound leakage, etc. But do feel free to stick your cameras on because it's always nice to see folks' faces. So, Aiberdeen Mannie, thanks very much for coming along today. It's really nice to be able to chat with you, and we're really looking forward to get a newsy with you and hear a bit about your work. So. To kick us off, a question that we ask quite a lot in this discipline, I suppose, is can you tell us a wee bit about yourself and how you came to start creating content on Instagram?
Hi, so I suppose a bit about myself is kind of exactly what it says in the tin, which is a middle-aged Mannie for Aiberdeen. So that's what I am. Now, summer of 2019, I was out of work voluntarily. I just had enough of a job and I was looking for another. And I was kind of aware of influencers, my nephews and that was telling me that you can make money online, influencing and selling products and all that. And I thought for a laugh, I could go and do that, because it's usually young loons and quines and glamorous folk that are doing it. And I thought, well, fit about a middle-aged man if I wears supermarket clothes and isn't really fashionable at all, fit sort of reaction would that get. So I did it, I wasn't expecting it to be on a him that would tap off, but it did kind of eventually. So I started on about I set up a page and I did a video or a video, as Aiberdeen Mannie would say, and the next day I think I had about 80 followers or something. So I'd shared it with a couple of pals and they'd shared it with pals and that. And then before long, after about 12 weeks, I think it was up to 2,000. So, and then for there it was up 1,000 every week until it got to about 12, I think. So so that's how I started doing it. And then I gave up on the influencing thing quite early and just thought I'd just have a laugh. So it's really just a comedy page, and I'll do videos about whatever's happening in my life or funny things that the missus have said or fits in the fridge, and using Northeast phrases to do it and to keep it local.
Great, very nice, thanks very much. And so you just kind of touched on fits in the fridge, fit you D and men, all these kind of different strands of videos that you put up. It kind of links to my next question, which is how do you go about coming up with that content? Where do you get those ideas, and then how do you develop them into something you're happy to publish?
Well, I think in the early days, because I wasn't working, it was anything that popped into my head would be going onto the page. So I'm a bit more selective now. So what I'll do generally is anything that happens on a day-to-day basis. If I can think of something funny or something that would a good Doric phrase that would describe it, then I'll tend to try and work in a video. And the videos function, you can get about a minute of a video. So I keep it to a minute long, come up with 3 or 4 things I want to say. Sometimes it'll be a first tack, I'll just do it and that's it, up. And other times it'll be 2 or 3, if I stumble over my words or don't get something quite right. And I always run it by a missus. She checks my grammar and punctuation and makes sure that I'm not embarrassing her or myself or anybody else. So that's kind of, I suppose, how it started. And then I started doing features like fits in the fridge or far do you get your fashion, just showing off my eclectic wardrobe or pretty much Dawn's tops and supermarket jeans. So there's no really a common theme to it. I don't think there's any real thing about it that I could say runs through other videos, apart from obviously why I speak and interact with folk.
But there seems to me to be there's a whole story world being built there, because you've got characters, you've got yourself, and you've got the missus that never appears, you've got Poops, your dog, you've got these different traditions, fits in the fridge, show me the thing about your fashion, you've got these different things. I'm just wondering how much of that is how much just emerges across all the videos and all the content you've made, and how much is kind of thought through and you're thinking, right, I'll do a video, I'll do a new strand of videos, a new tradition, if you like, or fits in the fridge. Yeah.
I'm not actually sure how it happens, to be honest. It's not something I sit down and think hard about. About 75% of it is just my life and actual things that a missus is buying at the shops and that, and I think that's funny. That's got to go up on the Instagram. But I don't think there's really I I sit and plan it out often, or think, right, I'm going to do this, or I've got no objectives for doing it. It's just whatever kind of pops into my head. And then there's been periods where I'll do like maybe, you know, 4 or 5 videos in a week, and then won't do for 3 or 4 weeks because either I've been busy or quite often I've no thought of anything funny or new to put up, so I just didn't bother.
I'm muted. Classic rookie error. Okay, so great. So, well, one thing that struck me from the very beginning, the very first Aiberdeen Mannie video that I saw, was that you can really be in no doubt that you're an Aiberdeen loon, that you're from Aberdeen. The Dons tops and the hats and the scarves and the references to local places, the local speech, the written language that kind of accompanies each video. It's all, to me anyway, it's all sort of screaming Aiberdeen, or at least northeast. And so I guess kind of linked to the last thing, how intentional is that? How intentional is the northeastness, or is it something, you know, is it something that just, as I say, emerges from the stuff that you do?
It's probably a bit of both, to be honest. I mean, I'm a massive Dons fan anyway, so, you know, and they play every week or every second week and that, so there's always something going on with that. Otherwise, I've never been anywhere in the northeast because of COVID and that, so I'm always dotting about from place to place. So I think there's like, that's just far I am, so it's northeast culture and that. But I mean, definitely I do try, because it's called Aiberdeen Mannie, and you know, that's kind of the whole brand, if you like. That's what folk, your real influencers speak about your brand. So I guess my brand is Aiberdeen in the northeast, you know. So I think it is intentional, but it's also and it's just part of my daily life and what I'm doing week to week.
All right. Okay, so given that a good chunk of it at least is intentional, as you say, can you tell us a bit about your kind of motivations then for rooting it so firmly in the region? If if it's a kind of a consciously done thing, what are there motivations? Are there reasons for that, or?
I think the main reason is I love Aberdeen. That's the truth. I love the language and the people and the culture, and kind of as far I grew up in the local area, and you know, the local dialect and everything about it, I just love. And I think as well, and Aberdeen gets a bit of a hard time for being tutors. You can put other football fans in Scotland will call the Dons fans, and there's that kind of, maybe we only sort of rural dialect, there's an idea that it's a bit bumpkin or something like that, and undereducated. So I don't care if I'm being on to counter that claim with some of the videos that I do, but I think I want to get the Aberdeen culture and the northeast culture out there, and it's something I'm actually really proud of. It belongs to me and you, and Abdi fa bides here, whether they're fae here or fae anyway, really. And there's folk, because I do get some messages for folk like that maybe bide in Australia now or England or whatever, and they'll actually message the Aiberdeen Mannie account and be like, I don't miss Aberdeen. They're actually watching the videos because they're missing being at home and hearing the language and that. So yeah, so I think a lot of it's the pride of the northeast, and being a massive Dons fan and that, it's just like, again, I just want to tell Abdi about the Dons. So yeah, it's a love of the place, and wanting to keep the culture alive and that, because I think there's a element of, particularly speaking in Doric and local dialects, that when I was growing up and that, folk would always say, can speak properly, when you were at school or gone into your work experience or whatever, there's an idea that speaking in your local dialect is undereducated or something like that. So which I then obviously I wouldn't again to a meeting in London and speak like this, kind of. I would speak like this. Aye, I think that's, I'm havering on. I forgot actually if I was speaking about in the first place, but hopefully some of that might have made some sense.
Oh, aye, absolutely. It was just about your motivations for
Aye,
making this kind of content. Sounds like
aye, but bigging up the northeast of Scotland basically would be the summary of that waffle.
so it's kind of it's in your view it's hasn't been bigged up, or it's been underplayed, or it's been overshadowed or something. Am I putting words in your mouth there, or?
A wee bit, but words I would probably agree with to an extent. And if you think of, you know, Scottish culture as a part of British culture, Scottish culture, you think probably Still Game and Billy Connolly and Glaswegian, you know, Burniston and, you know, Kevin Bridges is a big comedian as well. So Scottish culture is quite focused on Central Belt, Edinburgh, Glasgow. The population's all doing there and that. Or you think of kind of Highlands and Islands and shortbread and whiskey and that. And I don't think that Aberdeen really has the same status as those two things, or the Central Belt and the Highlands. When folk from outside of Scotland think about it, anyway. So again, there used to be, obviously, if it was Scotland or what, wasn't it? That they were local kind of Doric speaking comedians, but I don't ken how much that actually went out of the local area. If that was just they entertained folk for Elgin down to Montrose or something like that. Or, so I think there's yeah, I think Aberdeen is underrepresented in as being part of Scotland, and quite a big part of Scotland is kind of the northeast of Scotland is a big area. We kind of 300,000 folk or something in it. So aye, just I mean, I get a stat, so of Faz watching Aberdeen Mannie, you can see far Abdi is, and it's like Aberdeen 98%, Bunkery 1%. Again, it's mostly folk that are up here that are watching it, but there are folk for outside and that it reaches. But I think mainly the reach is locally. But aye, that's another bit of a waffle for you, but hopefully answering your question there, Simon.
No, that's good. Great. So you my next question sort of follows on quite nicely for that. You're speaking about folk messaging from abroad, getting some local interaction in the comments section and all that sort of stuff. I don't have any idea what kind of other direct messages you get, but I suppose the other kind of, from my perspective, the other half of this equation, or part of this equation, is the followers. So what do you know about them in terms of, you know, demographic? I mean, you're not going to give away personal details or anything here, but kind of demographics or age, etc. So what do you know about them first? And then secondly, have you got a sense of how you're impacting them? Because I can that you've I've seen it you've inspired other folk. I've seen Strathdon Mannie, so the young boy from Strathdon that sort of copies your videos on Instagram. So I'm just wondering, you know, have you had any sense of how you're impacting on either maybe fellow Instagrammers, but also on audiences? Are they, you know, how is that working, you think?
Aye, so I get my professional dashboard, you see, on Instagram. I don't know if you get that over a certain amount of followers or something like that, but that gives me other stats. So far folk are so I think it's like 65% male followers. The biggest group's like 18 to 24-year-olds. It started off, it was a lot of schoolies, and because I had a few catchphrases like "Where are you, man?" and "If it's in the fridge," and kids would be running about school, kind of, "Where are you, man? Where are you, man?" And I heard that from quite a few folk, which was quite strangely pleasing, I suppose. So I think there's an entertainment aspect of folk just liking somehow the way that aspect or the phrases that I come up with in that. And there was a few tribute acts as well, but a lot of the messages that I got in the early days, mainly for younger kind of school-aged teenagers, it would be the rain fits in the fridge videos. So I got, so I did kind of, if that's kind of an influence on somebody, but that is kind of the interactions I was saying in the early days. If I inspire anybody, even if it's just to be a bit of a clown and a joker, then I'm happy with that. But I think the main feedback that folk give me is that it's a laugh, it's light-hearted. Some folk can, if they've had I'm not bigging myself up, this is stuff that folks actually said to me. They've had a bad day and they'll come home and they'll put on an Aiberdeen Mannie video and they'll hear a chuckle. And I was, a lot of folk are moaning. I was positive, or as positive as I can be about Ahan. And I think folk like that and so there's, I think it's just fun of doing a video. There's a minute out of someone's day that they might, hey, a chuckle or two, but I did, folk got in touch early on in that. I did get a few messages for young kids about being bullied at school and that. So I kind of must have had some sort of counsellor vibe or something like that. That folk would, they were messaging me and telling me they were getting bullied. So I thought, okay, I'll do a video about that. So I did a video about bullying and I looked up kind of Scottish government's fit to D if you're being bullied advice and just translated it into Doric basically. And came up with a few things to keep it interesting and a bit more lighthearted but serious and so there was like a lot of it's just silly nonsense, but some of it was I'm trying to reach a bit more a serious message, and I've done messages about kind of getting a vaccine or donating blood or stuff like that can try to encourage folk to do good things or to help folk out. But generally, the feedback, I've not had any negative feedback. You hear a lot about folk getting bullied and trolls and that. I've never, or if I have, it's flown right over my head because I've not noticed it, but overwhelmingly positive feedback is what I get, and when I meet folk out and about, they're positive about it. But I don't think it really, if I've made a couple of folk chuckle, that'll do me. If that's my impact out Aiberdeen Mannie, I'll be quite happy about that.
Great, that's really interesting to hear the stuff about the kids using the catchphrases in the playground and the what was the other one now? They're sending you their fits in the fridge videos. I mean, even just that, I presume they were sending you in using their speaking in Scots. So even just kind of using it that's a nice thing. So what about so your world is online? Well, I mean, could be understood as an internet celebrity, fame native to the internet. So not famous before and then moved on to the internet, but famous for your stuff on the internet. But what happens offline? What happens when you meet people? I presume you live locally, so you must have met some followers. Have you got any? Has that happened?
Aye, it's
what happens. What happens in those cases?
That's been the strangest thing about it, and I think because at age I'm a middle-aged Mannie, and I didn't grow up with Instagram and Facebook and that I didn't have an Instagram account before I did this, and I never really thought much of it or it was a big deal. So even when I had 12,000 followers, I'm not really thinking, oh, I'm famous or I'm a celebrity. Or I could probably say your generation. If I played for the Dons or I was on the BBC Scotland or in a panto or something like that, I'd be like, that's a famous person. But I never really considered somebody that's on Instagram as being necessarily famous. Obviously, I can't folk followed me, but then when I've met folk about it's because I'm quite shy and or I can be if you catch me off guard, I can be a bit shy. So folk have been genuinely starstruck, is how I would hate a bit. So I kind of went into Chipper last year at some point, and I was masked up, so you could only see my eyes, and the boy behind the counter was like, I didn't need to ask you if you've got an Instagram account, do you? I'm like, No, no, that's right. Aiberdeen Mannie, and he started getting, he started blushing. He's going, I can't believe I've met you. And to me, it, it, I can't quite get my head about that, but like everybody that I've met has been like absolutely magic. At first, actually, so when I started it, I wasn't working, and then I got a job, and the first weeks of my job, I was offshore Europe, at the exhibition centre. So I'm going in there with a colleague, and I'm thinking, hope nobody's going to recognise me as Aiberdeen Mannie here. And I just started at this workplace, and within 5 minutes, this boy made a beeline for me, face style, and he's like, Aiberdeen Mannie. And then it was selfies, and and my colleagues going, fit on earth. Well, they weren't saying fit on earth, they were saying, what on earth? What is this Aiberdeen Mannie thing? So, and my dog is, the most famous dogs in Aberdeen, I think, because some folk, when they even speak to me, I'll be walking Coops, and they'll be like, Coops, man. and so he gets recognised before I do, but yeah, generally, Abdi, for I meet on and recognising me as Aiberdeen Mannie, they're really kind of friendly and positive, and they can be a bit shy, and I can be a bit shy, and so it can sometimes be a bit awkward, but they're generally just positive. Really, I've never had a bad experience with it, thankfully.
Okay. That sort of that younger age group, the 18 to 24 was your biggest group, and I don't know if there's younger on Instagram possibly, but that sort of mid to late teens, early 20s, their patterns of consumption, media consumption, has changed so much, isn't it? But you're saying that folk will maybe have a bad day, they'll go home and they'll flick on Aiberdeen Mannie, have a laugh, try and lift their mood a wee bit or something. But that those changing patterns of consumption means that for a lot of young folks, social media is if it would have been the TV, it would have been their telly, because
exactly,
IGTV, Instagram TV, people will be on it and they'll flick through video after video. And nowadays on TikTok, it's endless videos. It's kind of constant broadcasting, and I think a lot of younger folk are using that as their TV today. I see it on. That's why I was thinking that all the different internet celebrities, if we want to use that term for the Northeast, they sort of comprise, although they're across the different platforms, there's a whole broadcasting movement there. There's a whole sort of there's a small what's the word I'm looking for? Explosion of broadcasting in the Northeast, about the Northeast, using Northeast tropes and culture and things like that. So I'm finding that really interesting, and that you meeting the youngins, who are consuming your content as if it were TV, as their entertainment, as their leisure, what they do in their leisure time. I think that's really fascinating stuff.
And I think part of that is before, like Instagram and YouTube people creating their own content, I was gone through kind of production companies and newspapers, and there's a block there, saying, right, that's fit we're publishing, that's fit we're showing on air tonight, and kind of local stuff like folks speaking Doric, it doesn't have broad appeal kind for BBC Scotland, maybe just for the Northeast. So it maybe never got to that stage. Now folk can make their own content, and I think that's part of the reason that you can reach that amount of folk and folk across the globe. And like I've seen folk in Australia that are for the Northeast and miss it. So it was an eye opener for me, because I can't about Instagram, but I didn't ken that it was as big as it is, or as big to me or as big to the youngins as being on the TV would have been to me, Ken.
I was just reading today, actually, just a couple of days ago, that kind of, you saw it, the Wall Street Journal published an article about the use of Scots on TikTok and Twitch.
Iona Fife was.
Iona was featured in it.
She was featured in it. I saw her. She posted up something about that. Yeah, I'm a proper Aiberdeen Mannie. I was never going to subscribe to the Wall Street Journal. Actually read the article, but aye. No, I saw the headline.
No, I asked her to send me the text, so I saw it. But in the article, Michael Dempster, who's the kind of head of the Scots Language Centre, he's talking. He was sort of saying that actually the Scots is happening in a massive way online, massive way. You know, as I say, TikTok, Twitch. I'm not really a gamer, so I'm not sure who to follow on Twitch to follow that. But you can. There's something emerging here that's really interesting.
Aye.
Aye, so well, I mean, I'm coming to the end of my questions, but I've just got a couple of quick ones. What does the future hold for Aberdeen, Mannie?
I've got no plans at all. I think I need an agent. Or do you want to be my agent, Simon?
I've got a job. I can't do it right now. Okay. I'm a bit full on.
So,
maybe somebody in here could do that.
Aye, anybody that wants to be my agent can give us a shout. But I'll just keep doing the odd video, and like I love doing things like this, on anything to do with Northeast culture, Doric, and that sort of thing. I'll keep doing my videos. Again, I'll think of some new content rather than fits in the fridge. But I didn't really have any particular plans for Aberdeen Mannie, just to keep being an Aberdeen Mannie, basically.
Have you no thinking about TikTok? Does it no tempt you?
No, a lot of the youngins have been trying to get me onto it, but Instagram's confusing enough for me, to be honest.
Okay. Well, a final one then for me, and we've sort of touched on it already, but I'll just give the last word to you. What do you think the future holds then for Northeast culture, youngins, the digital age, digital times? How are you feeling about it in general?
Better than without it, I would say, on the basis that, like we did touch on before, that it's self-created content. So folk like me and Doric Da and whoever else will keep marking it, folk will keep consuming it, and folk will keep speaking like this. Or again, it keeps it alive in the public domain, even if you're not speaking it on a day-to-day basis at school or work or whatever. There's still it's keeping the language alive on a new platform. So I think actually the digital age or social media is actually probably a really good thing for our sort of culture and language being maintained and kept a record of, as well as obviously the Elphinstone Institute and the fantastic work that you do.